All right, everybody. Welcome. Those of you who are in person, those of you that are on Zoom, to this course, the Kabbalah of Meaning. Now, the Kabbalah of Meaning, as a title, is a little bit of a word salad. They did it because they focus grouped what words pull people in. They heard the word Kabbalah, the word meaning, like run with it. Now, for many of you that are here, and as Izzy pointed out, we've had courses on Kabbalah and we've had courses on meaning. So, in what way is this going to stand out? And the answer is because it's not going to be a course on Kabbalah and it's not going to be a course on meaning. So, with that in mind, so what exactly is this course on? It's actually a course on making soup. No, just kidding. No, nothing to do with making soup. Although maybe that wouldn't be such a bad idea. Give me 1 second. Okay. Somebody needs the Zoom link. .com/Zoom. Okay. Did I get it? Yes. Okay. All right. So now the course obviously has in the title course on meaning. And that is in no small part the thrust of where we're going. But for all of you who have attended courses, JLI courses in the past, and there we had one called Toward a Meaningful Life, et cetera, you would say, wait a minute, but courses on meaning, something that we've had already. We're going to see that very quickly we're going to graduate past what was perhaps meaning 101 that we've been teaching so far and moving into an entirely different area. And we said, as many of you have heard in my various marketing things, it's going to be a twist here in lesson 1 that's going to set up the rest of the course. So let's begin. Let's begin by acknowledging that society today has a really big problem, a really significant problem, one that we are grappling with. One can make almost an argument that the first world is facing a midlife crisis right now. Midlife crises don't really happen to people of the third world, et cetera, et cetera. My grandfather didn't know what the concept of a midlife crisis was. Midlife crisis is the luxury of those that have a lot, that have plenty of means to live, right? They have, they're living a comfortable life. And as a society today, we all kind of have that, and we've reached a point of, let's call it a maturity in that sense. We've already lived now more than one generation in this sense of comfort and having not really struggle. We haven't faced any major world wars as a society in the past little bit. Yeah, no, that's the bell from people logging into the Zoom. And yet, similar to a midlife crisis, we're seeing that society is suffering from a lack of direction. We don't find that people are actually happy. There's a huge deficit of happiness. It's interesting that there's a well-known radio personality who generally engages in politics, a Jewish guy, a very proudly Jewish guy named Dennis Prager. Many of you know, have heard of him, et cetera, et cetera. Dennis Prager was approached by who was then the Chabad rabbi at UCLA back in the day, one of the first pioneer Chabad rabbis on campus. And his name was Rabbi Schwartz. And what's interesting is that nobody knew him as Rabbi Schwartz. Everybody knew him as Schwartzy. And he walked around in a pair of dungarees, and he was, at a certain point, became a little too colorful for Chabad. We still kept him on as an honorary member, but he had to change. He opened the L'chaim Center, the Chabad, because he had a little bit of a, let's call it, on the edge approach to outreach, which made him beloved and lovable and whatever it was. On campus in the 70s with the lulav and etrog, he would go over to a whole bunch of girls and say, "Hey, you want to touch my lulav?" That was his approach. But he got students, and he has hundreds that he brought back to Yiddishkeit. And to the point that he actually has a branch here on the East Coast. He passed away, but his book is actually on the shelf, and it's called I Love It When It Happens. The book, the color of the pages on the side, sometimes they put a little color, is psychedelic tie-dye, because that's the kind of person he was. and he really was an incredibly special, colorful figure. And he very who speaks to Dennis Prager. Would like you to come speak lecture to the Jewish students on campus. And he says, "What am I going to talk about? I'm more or less right wing. At UCLA, I'm an anathema, and I'm going to go speak politics on the campus. I can't speak politics on the campus. So what am I going to? That's my forte. What do I speak about?" He says, "You're a smart man. Speak about anything," says Rabbi Schwartz to him. So he says, "Speak really about anything." He says, "Speak about happiness." And Dennis looks at him and says, I can't speak about happiness because I actually think that happiness is a really big problem." And Dennis Prager talks about this on his show regularly. He says, the answer that Rabbi Schwartz gave me changed the trajectory of my career. He said, "Great title." And that was the lecture. Happiness is a big problem. And it was the most attended lecture at UCLA by kind of a guest speaker that semester. He then incorporated this as an hour every week called the Happiness Hour, the most tuned into hour of his weekly audience. It was an hour we talked about happiness because it turns out that everybody agrees that happiness in today's society is a really big problem. Do you know that the Chabad rabbi in um, uh, in California, Palo Alto, right? This is one of the most successful places. This is right Silicon Valley, most successful areas in the country. Was telling a story that they have it was because a quaint town or whatever it is, the way they built it, they had the railroad track kind of running right through the town, just like you sometimes see. And they started to have to put on at every point of the railroad track, the city of Palo Alto spent millions of dollars putting impenetrable barriers. When they used to just have the flashing, the train would pass by every once in a while. There's enough time for everybody to get out of the way. They had to start putting impenetrable barriers because kids, by kids I mean teenagers, etc. It was becoming an epidemic of people deliberately putting themselves on the track. In Palo Alto, California. And what is going on? What is going on in society that we are dealing with this issue, right? Summed up here, so this was as we've been coming of age as a first world society. Carl Jung wrote, right? About a third of my cases are not suffering from any clinical definable neuroses, but from senselessness and aimlessness of their lives. That was Carl Jung. Today, text 2, you can find in the book. I'm going to come back to text 1. I'm going to read because those that are on Zoom don't have the books in front of them. Depression, anxiety, and substance abuse have reached epidemic proportions globally. In 2017, 66.6 million Americans, more than half of the respondents of the National Survey on Drug Use and Health report binge drinking within the past month, and 20 million met the criteria for substance abuse disorder. By the way, I'm sorry, page 3. 31% of American adults will develop a full-blown anxiety disorder at some point in their lives. That's a third with a serious mental health condition. A third of American adults. And 19% in any given year. The World Health Organization reports that the World Health Organization, we have to take their numbers lately. They've proven they have to take their numbers with a grain of salt. But at least if it's let's say it's not about the Middle East. Let's just back here. The 264 million people on the planet are depressed. Depression is the third most costly disability worldwide. Each year, 17 million American adults are depressed. Over 16% of youth in the late adolescence currently face depression, and the impact of depression on suicide accounts for the second leading cause of death in adolescence, rivaled only by the death by auto accident. While the stakes of our mental health crisis are truly life and death, many of us also suffer from less debilitating, though still painful conditions, burnout, chronic stress, trouble concentrating and connecting, loneliness and isolation, lives that are rich in many ways yet somehow feel narrow, hollow, and cut off. Let's just do this an anecdotal test, unless you don't feel comfortable with them. How many of you, when you're looking at those words, chronic stress, burnout, trouble concentrating, those words speak to them in some way or another? So this is a real thing. This is a real issue that we're having, right? Even when we experience success and satisfaction, we may sense that there's more to happiness, that life could be more joyful, rewarding, and meaningful, right? And here's the thing. While our society, now after thousands of years, et cetera, of psychoanalysis and trial and error, or whatever it is coming to the realization that maybe there's something missing in our life, the wisest man who ever lived nailed it in the opening statement of his third great work. I'm referring to Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, right? King Solomon wrote famously Shir Hashir, the Song of Songs. He also wrote Mishlei, Proverbs, in which he gives life advice. And then he writes perhaps what is considered the most introspective of all his works, Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, right? And writes Shlomo HaMelech. This is the opening line of Ecclesiastes. The words of Kohelet, son of David. He's referring to himself as Kohelet, king in Jerusalem. So he lays his credentials here, not to brag, but actually to make the point about why you should listen to what he is saying. Because he has the bona fides to say what he's saying. He's not some guy, some wino in a bar. Okay, this is King of Jerusalem, son of the greatest king of Jerusalem. Or in a way, in a certain way, he was the greatest king that Israel ever had. And yet here's what he says. Hevel havalim hakol havel. Futility of futilities, said Kohelet. Futility of futilities, all is futile. What profit has man in his toil that he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but only the earth endures forever. This sounds like a emo teen, right? Writing on the wall of a bathroom in a high school somewhere. This is Shlomo HaMelech writing. What's the point? What's the point? It's all futile, right? What is this all for? Only the earth endures. Rather, what we are understanding here is that Shlomo HaMelech is not depressed. God forbid. Shlomo HaMelech is not depressed, and he's not nihilistic, and he's not writing off everything, but he's making a point. I've seen it all, I've had it all, etc., and I'm going to tell you that most of the things that you're going to pursue in life is futile. It's not going to be enduring, it's not going to be lasting, it's not, interestingly enough, going to make you happy. I've said this a few times, and the profundity of it is not mine, but it's something that's very important to hear and understand. Our founding fathers founded this country on Judeo-Christian values. We know where most of the Christian values come from, so ultimately Judeo values, and they tried to put it as succinctly as possible that the moral principle of that encapsulates this experiment that we are trying here in these United States is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Turns out that they got that wrong. They got that wrong. That's not the Jewish value. Because the pursuit of happiness is exactly what Shlomo HaMelech referred to as futile. As futile. Pursuing happiness will never lead to happiness. Ask any major celebrity. Do you know how dangerous it is to be a celebrity? Do you know what the suicide rates among celebrities are? Addiction overdose. Are just ruining their life in some crazy way or another. It's very dangerous to be a celebrity. Why? Because the celebrity has not only pursued happiness, they were darn good at it. And by the age of 20, they have everything that society told them is what leads to happiness. Money, fame, recognition, right? Everything. And then they realize something. that they're at the top of this Mount Everest that society told them is where everything is, and they're staring down the barrel of the next 70 years of their life. There's nowhere for them to go. There's no more up. They have more money than they know what to do with. They have more houses and cars and fame, etc., etc. And they have the terrible realization that they're not happy at all. And where do they go for the next 70 years? What do they do for the next? Where do we go? Do I try to earn another $1,000,000? Is that going to make me happy? Another house, another car, more famous, so more people mob me on the street? Where do I go from here? I've been pursuing happiness and I'm further than I was before I started pursuing it. And nobody's got any good advice. Havel havalim hakol havel. They realize what Shlomo HaMelech is saying. They understand it to be true. So what is it ultimately about? And so here is the key and important point. What we discover, what they sometimes, the healthy ones, because what eventually happens is they will break down invariably to make one of three choices. First choice that most of them will make is what we just finished talking about. They'll escape. They'll escape this reality. Either with the ultimate unfortunate choice, or the drugs and the alcohol is all to do what? To escape. Or they will find religion, right? And because nobody normal is around them, giving them any normal advice, they go find Scientology or whatever it is. Or they'll find a cause, right? This is Sally Fields for Save the Whales, right? Also, because nobody normal around them, this is so-and-so for anti-Israel genocide, right? But what is it that they've come to realize? What is it that's missing in their lives? That actually, meaning. Meaning. Because meaning equals happiness. As Viktor Frankl says, and listen to this one line that makes the worth of the purchase of the book. But now I'm going to tell it to you, so you don't have to purchase the book. But if you just got that one line from this book, from his famous book, right, Man's Search for Meaning, he writes like this. Nowadays, even more today, he writes, people have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. They have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. Meaning actually equals happiness. Meaning, when you have meaning in your life, then you're happy. And pleasure does not equal meaning. So if you're pursuing pleasure because you think that that's going to make you happy, well, the arithmetic will not add up, because happiness comes from meaning, and pleasure doesn't equal meaning. Doesn't mean it won't also overlap, but there is no direct correlation at all. If it is a fluke that something is both meaningful and pleasurable, okay, good, wonderful. But there is no direct correlation, none, between pleasure and meaning. And if happiness comes from meaning, then pleasure equals meaning, or pleasure equals happiness is an untrue statement. Pleasure can be part of what makes you happy, just like pleasure can be part of a meaningful pursuit, but it is not a given, and there is no direct corollary. And here we'll prove this point. We have an exercise on page 78. Oops, not 78. On page. No, yeah, 78. Okay. 78. Did I say 78? I meant to say page 6. Yes. Which is the right? Maybe something is in here.
Or should be.
Right, or should be. Okay, page 6. Here is an interesting exercise. Again, it's not going to be this, not rocket science, but it'll perhaps help you in your own mind parse this point. Describe at least one activity that brings you pleasure and that you find meaningful. Taking your grandkids to a baseball game, right? Something along that is both pleasurable and meaningful. But then test yourself to parse this. Describe at least one activity that brings you pleasure, but you do not find meaningful. Taking your kids to the baseball team. No. That would be meaningful. That would be the last one. Something that you find meaningful, but is not pleasurable. Right? Right. For certain men, it might be going to the opera with their spouse. Meaningful, but not necessarily pleasurable. Right? But do you understand the difference? You are forcing yourself to acknowledge that there is not that necessarily that direct correlation. In fact, there's necessarily not that direct correlation. Eating a bag of chips is pleasure. It's pleasurable. It's a pleasurable experience. Sitting and watching a football game is pleasure, not necessarily meaningful. Well, unless you're a Redskins fan, then it's not either pleasurable. But we understand that there's so many things that we do in our day that are pleasurable, but they're not meaningful, and ultimately are not going to be the things that bring us real happiness. And then we flip it, and we find things that are meaningful and they're not pleasurable, but they actually do bring happiness. For example, exactly going with your spouse to the opera, even if you hate opera, but it's a meaningful moment you're spending with your spouse, and therefore there's more happiness in that than in that indulgence of the potato chips that you had, or what have you. So ultimately, again, could they overlap? Of course. And we should endeavor to have both. Why not? But to think that pursuing pleasure automatically means you're going to be happy, no, because a key ingredient is going to be missing. The key ingredient for happiness, which is ultimately meaning. Why? Why is this like that? The answer to that is because you are not created by accident. Me, you, and everybody else were not created by accident. And as such, we were created in a specific way. And that specific way that we were created is going to have an effect on what makes us feel fulfilled and make our life feel full. Imagine you can anthropomorphize a hammer, and you tell this hammer, here's what I'm going to do to give you a very comfortable life. I'm going to lay you on a cushion, right? And I'm going to polish you so you're all nice and shiny and fancy, and you're going to sit there on the cushion, basking in a perfect room temperature, just enjoying your existence. And what's the hammer going to say? I'd rather just hit a nail, right? Give me a good nail to hit, right? I want to hit a nail because I'm a hammer. I want to hit a nail. I don't want to sit comfortably on a pillow. I want to hit a nail, right? Or like that hot rod in the garage, right? You sat there, built a car, put in a souped-up engine, right? And a great, 8-cylinder engine into this thing, a drivetrain and everything, whatever it is, and you never take it out on the road, and it's sitting there polished in the garage, beautiful. Now, if that car could talk, what would it say? Absolutely right. Feeling quite empty sitting in this garage, right? I want to be out there. I've got the engine. Let me go, right? We as human beings will find ourselves, our lives, the fullest, and therefore the happiest when we are aligned with who we are with who we are. If you discover Allah, you will be a happy. If you are out of alignment, a human being is doing what to do, and a hammer is doing what a human being likes to do. They're not going to be living a happy life. Right? We all know this. A very basic example of this is if a person is born with a natural what's it called, gift for art and a passion for it, right? And either nobody sits there and channels that for them, or they don't discover it, or what have you. And they're earning a 9 to 5 living in a soul-sucking job, right? There's something truly sad and tragic about that. Why? They're earning a living. They're earning a good living. They're going about. They're going to the job. They're doing a competent performance. They're coming home with a paycheck. We can all understand that that's tragic. Or somebody who has innate social skills, right? And it's just great with people. Every time they walk into a room and they talk, people feel great, right? And you put them in front of a computer to do coding, right? Are they getting something done? Yes. But are they aligned with who they are? No. And therefore, there's going to be something significantly missing. You cannot ask a hammer to be a screwdriver, right? I've tried. I've used them both, and I have in desperate moments tried to knock in a nail with the back of a screwdriver. It doesn't work well. Jackie Mason has a whole routine about Jews and the one tool they have in their toolbox. It says it's the butter knife. It says with this end you can screw things in, with that end you can bang, you can hack, you can always tell. He says you can always tell which screw a Jew started still has the cream cheese on it from the. But the bottom line is if reducing it down to that simplistic thing, we can then broaden it out and say, yeah, that's there's a lot of truth to that. Let's be aligned. Yes.
In the music world, I've always referred to it as the sacred fire. That one wishes in life that whatever you do is because it ignited that sacred fire inside of you. And you can have it for any profession, not just in the arts. You can be a servant. You aspire to serve people. So you're a waiter your whole life. But finding that, unfortunately, too many people don't get that ignited.
You should know it's what you said is not only profound, but the second point that it could be in anything, right? People see it in art more, right? In music or art. Turns out we know a guy. Me and Izzy both know this guy, Ian Goldman, right? Ian Goldman from Potomac. Funny guy, really a funny guy, great guy. What does he do for a living? Air conditioning and heating. At one point or another, I asked him. I said, "Ian, do you enjoy this?" I mean, because he was getting old. He's getting down on his knees. He's clicking under something, and it's like, is this what pays the bills? He comes out from under there. He says, "Rabbi, I love what I do. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything." I'm like, okay, explain. He says, first of all, I'm a people's person. I meet a lot of people, constantly meeting people, and I love making and fixing things. I love like coming in and there's a situation, but I can grab it, I can tackle it, I can fix it. I walk away and boom, what I've done is I can point, says, before I came in, problem. After I came in, solved. Exactly. That's a guy who's going to say, "Don't let me touch a violin. I want to be fixing something." And so it's remarkable. The bottom line is everybody has their own thing, and what brings you happiness is not the pleasure. Trust me, he's down on his hands and knees, and every time he gets on his hands and knees, he goes, "Oi," right? And it's dusty, and it's usually if there's a problem with the heating and air conditioning, it means the room is not properly climatized. It's either boiling hot or freezing cold wherever he's working. And yet he won't trade it for the world because in it feeds a certain. This is bringing to fruition his unique nature, and it all comes down to the fact that he had an answer. If he said, "I don't know," then you could just say he got lucky. But he had an answer, and the answer comes down to he has self-awareness. He has a self-awareness. He knows I'm a people person and I like fixing things, and this lines up. This knowing, having an awareness of self is how you can then bring yourself into alignment with what you do. So the first thing is you got to get to know yourself. That's a whole nother Jackie Mason routine. The best one he's ever had. It comes in. I'm gonna butcher it, but it goes through the whole routine. He says about this. It comes to a psychologist. He said the psychologist took it one look at him. It says, "This is not you." He says, "This is not me." So then why am I coming to you for? Because together we're going to go and we're going to find the real you. Says, what happens if we go and I find the real me and I don't like the real me? What happens if we find the real me and the real me doesn't like you? What happens if I find the real me and the real me is you and you owe me $50? Yeah. Even 25-20. Knowing who you are is the key first step in coming into alignment. So who are we? Now, before we go, we're not going to do each individual person, but we'll back up. We'll back up and we'll first take in the broader scope. Who are we as a human being? The common denominator that we all have. Please don't tell me you're not. If you're an AI robot, get out. The rest of us human beings, this is of course for human beings only. But who are human beings? Yes, but the makeup of our soul, right? You're ultimately right. We are not our bodies, we are our soul. But what is the body of a human being? Is there anywhere in the Torah where it says human being equals this? Yes, it does. And it's not going to be the answer you expect. It's not it's going to sound a lot more mundane than you think. Human being equals tree. Tree. You don't believe me? Look at text 3. It says when the Jewish people will lay siege to cities in the Holy Land, right, in the land of Canaan, they can do a lot to in a sense, to execute the battle, right, to execute a battle successfully. A lot of different things they're allowed to do. One thing they're not allowed to do is what? Chop down fruit trees. They're not allowed to chop down fruit trees. Next 3, here it is, quote from Deuteronomy. When you besiege a city for many days, waging war against it to capture it, do not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them, for from them you shall eat, and you shall not cut them down. That would seem to be just pragmatic advice. What happens if I happen to have other sources of food? Can I then chop it down? Then the Torah throws in the next caveat. For the tree of the field is a human, but you shall besiege it. Or just, Ki Adam Eitz HaSadeh. This is the quote from the Torah. A Torah that in general does not speak in much in the way of metaphors. Metaphors are for scripture, for later books of the prophets, etc., and Tehillim and Kohelet and Proverbs, the book that is literally called Proverbs. The Torah generally speaks very clearly. Here, the Torah drops this metaphor on us. Ki Adam Eitz HaSadeh. The human is a tree of the field. Human equals tree. And this actually plays into Jewish life and culture, that the fact that we equal tree. The Talmud in tractate Rosh Hashanah, right, describes that there's, how many days is Rosh Hashanah? 2 days. How many holidays is Rosh Hashanah? 1. Nope, the Talmud says there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. Now you know. You didn't know there was 4 Rosh Hashanahs. Now that's why you got to study Talmud. 4 Rosh Hashanahs. There's the Rosh Hashanah for the animals. There's the Rosh Hashanah for, as we talked about, correct. I was going to get to that one last time. The Rosh Hashanah for trees. The Rosh Hashanah for trees. Now, the Rosh Hashanah for animals, by the way, is the first day of the month of Elul. How many of you have celebrated that? Yeah, correct. It's not your Rosh Hashanah, right? It's a Rosh Hashanah for the animals. There's no reason why you should celebrate. But then comes the question, if that's the case, then the Rosh Hashanah for the trees should be none of my business. It's the Rosh Hashanah for the trees. In today's vernacular, that's cultural appropriation that we celebrate. How dare you celebrate the Rosh Hashanah? It's not your Rosh Hashanah. It's the trees' Rosh Hashanah, but yet we celebrate. The 15th, coming up, actually, we're going to celebrate the birthday of the trees. Because, for this reason only, there's no other explanation why other Rosh Hashanahs are delineated in tractate Rosh Hashanah, And we don't celebrate them because they're not for us. It's the Rosh Hashanah for the animals, the Rosh Hashanah for the Rosh Hashanah for the trees. We all of a sudden make it our own also. We celebrate their Rosh Hashanah because of this reason, because in many ways we are like a tree. And we are supposed to derive those lessons from a tree. And most importantly, looking at a tree gives us that self-awareness into what will bring us a sense of meaning, and primarily in four different things. First point is we have to stay true to ourselves. A tree, right, plants and stays there. You uproot a tree and it's no longer a tree. But in four specific ways that we are going to parse in this lesson, that really helps us define what our priorities should be and what will bring us a sense of meaning and therefore a sense of happiness. Growth, productivity, giving, and relationships. We're going to see how a tree embodies all four of these principles. And because we are like a tree, it doesn't mean that these are things we should aspire to. Of course, we should aspire to them. But more importantly, we're saying this is our identity. So unless we are pursuing these four things, we will not find meaning and we will not be happy. These four things bring us more greater sense of meaning and than anything else we will pursue. It should say, in other words, life, liberty, and the pursuit of growth, productivity, giving, and relationships. That should be, but that would have been very long. Ultimately, it says, as far as Judaism is concerned, meaning, and meaning is found in these four. Let's pick them apart. Okay. First, the most obvious element about a tree is that it grows. A lot of things grow, right? But a tree is unique in that it's in a state of perpetual growth. How do you know this? Right. The tree rings, right? You can know the age of the tree by its growth rings. As long as the tree is alive, it's growing. Because if that were not to be the case, you would not be able to know the age of the tree by the growth rings. Maybe it has stopped growing and it's continuing to live. So I can't know the age by the growth rings unless it is constantly adding growth rings as long as it's alive, i.e., it's growing perpetually. A tree is constantly growing. That's a very important thing, because in this, a human being is different from most other creatures in that it mimics the tree. What do we mean by this? I don't mean physical growth, right? I think all of us know that at a certain point a certain point in our life, we stop physically growing and start going backwards, right? In that regard. And if the only thing that continues to perpetually grow is our nose hairs, that doesn't stop growing. In fact, and as much as we would love that it would, that's the one part that doesn't stop growing. Here, everywhere else stops growing except for our nose and our ears. That's where hair continues to grow from. But other than that, physical growth is not what we mean. Rather, what do we mean? We mean this point. Text 5, Kabbalah says this. Again, not surprisingly, from King Solomon, not surprisingly, from Ecclesiastes, from Kohelet. He says as follows. How many understand? Again, he's lamenting this in his discussion about futility. He's lamenting that most people are not aware. How many understand that the spirit of the human ascends on high while the spirit of the animal descends to the earth? What is he saying? He says that the natural animalistic tendency in an animal is to just try to be comfortable and lazy. When you get as powerful as the king of the jungle, as the lion, and you don't have to run around to protect yourself or to get food, you know what you do for 4/5 of the day? Sleep like a behemoth. Animals are innately lazy. Why? They have no innate desire for self-betterment. You've never seen a lion on a treadmill. It's not working out. It's not trying to do this. It's not taking philosophy classes. It's not moving past algebra into trigonometry. None of that. An animal does what it needs to survive, instinctively what it needs to survive, where sometimes it includes in that survival ring its immediate family or the pride or whatever it is. But if it gets all of that taken care of, and we have that in our own human nature, the human nature to indulge and be comfortable and be lazy, all that says Shlomo HaMelech is the spirit of the animal. And therefore, because it's the spirit of the animal and not the spirit of the human, in there will not be meaning, and in there, therefore, will not be happiness. Rather, the spirit of the human is to ascend, is a desire to grow. You're proving it right now. What in the world are you doing here at 8:20 p.m. listening to a rabbi drone on when you can sit on a couch, eat a good snack, and watch an entertaining television show? You are the proof to this point. This is self-betterment. This is self-growth. I'm adding to what I know, to my knowledge. It's something that we have innately as children. It is remarkable to watch a child instinctively try to become better, to be able to achieve more, to do more in a way that's not comfortable. Watch a child try to learn to walk. It's so much more comfortable to stay down and not fall on your face or on your rear end or to walk into a wall. And yet the child with the tenacity gets up and tries to walk, then tries to run, then tries to ride a bike, and then wants the training wheels off the bike so they can fall another 6 times. You say it's more comfortable with the training wheels. It's easier. You're never going to fall off. No, growth, achievement. We all have it innately, and it is to our own emotional peril when we stop trying to grow. Then we will quickly find that we are feeling empty. This is so innately true. Listen, I've talked about this also a few times. There was a rash of suicides in the local high schools, and I was brought in by the principal of Walt Whitman to lecture to the students. Brought in a lot of spiritual leaders, whatever it is, and I talked to them about this point. I said that that a child that there is a higher suicide rate among teenagers in Bethesda is in Rwanda. So it can't clearly be which one is living a more difficult life. This kid in Rwanda has to get up at 5 a.m, walk 3 miles to get potable water to bring back for the rest of his family. And this child is going to fight for life harder than a child in Bethesda whose parents bought him a luxury car. Why? Because it turns out that life is not defined by how easy and comfortable it is, but rather what we're talking about now, how meaningful it is. And I said, I'm going to give you a thought exercise to consider. I told these high schoolers. I said, I'm going to give you the most comfortable life possible. I'm going to give you a 6-figure salary to sit on your couch and watch your favorite Netflix shows. And that's it. I'm an eccentric billionaire, and I just whatever. It makes me happy to pay somebody to sit on the couch and watch Netflix shows. You'll be one of my living fixtures in my living room. Just sit there, watch a Netflix show. I said, if I was going to get 6 figures, I'm going to pay you 6 figures to do that. You're not going to have to work a day in your life. You're just going to sit and laze around on the couch. I asked them, how long do you think you can do that before you go crazy? No necessity to get up. Zero necessity to get off that couch. But how long do you think you can do before you go crazy? Do you know that not one of these kids, they were not religious kids, it wasn't like they had religion or whatever it is, not one of them, one of these high schoolers said over 6 months. That was the highest, that's the longest one of them said, I can do it for about 6 months. Not one of them. All of them realized something innately. It was never taught to them as a point, but all of them realized innately that life is not about sinking to the earth like the animals. Life has to be with some growth, with achievement. I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror and see what? How do you say it in Yiddish? What does everybody want to look in the mirror and see in the mirror? A mensch. What does the word mensch literally mean? A human. That's all it means. Except that a mensch is the highest compliment. You're a mensch. Because Yiddishkeit recognized in that is what a human is. That's what makes a human, is that they're growing beyond their natural, just kind of lowest tendencies. They are looking to transcend their baser natures. They're looking to grow and be better. Self-betterment is to be a human. Do you understand this? As far as Yiddish is concerned, self-betterment being a good slice of humanity is to be simply human. It's interesting that it is the exact opposite use of the word than in modern society. When you say, "Oh, he's only human," in modern society, what do you mean by that statement? Just the opposite. Don't expect him to be a mensch. He's only human, right? Except that in Yiddishkeit, to be a human is to hold yourself to that highest standard, to be a mensch. And in society that doesn't know this as innately as we have it in Yiddishkeit, to be a human is to be a sophisticated animal. That's what we mean when we say you're only human. You're one step up from the monkey. That's it. Think about it. When you say, "Oh, he's only human," that excuses pretty animalistic behavior. Right? Text 6 sums this up. What is the Torah definition of a human? A human has the capacity for self-assessment. A human has the mental and moral capacity to override impulse. Can a dog decide to go on a diet? A human can choose to follow his moral compass instead of his physical inclination. A human can calculate consequences beyond the immediate. That is the Torah description of a human, the Torah's definition of a mensch, something we should all strive for. Interestingly, the term has the different connotations when used in American parlance. When a man is weak and less than noble, impulse driven instead of morally focused, what do we say? Listen, he's only human. In our vernacular, recognizing that a person is a human is acknowledging his inherent weakness. We see a human as inherently flawed and morally feeble. We cut guy slack because we know he can't reach a noble goal. After all, he's only human. What can we really expect from this person of flesh and blood? Think about it. The Torah Jewish term of human, mensch, is something to strive for, while the American human is a fallback position in case of moral failure. You see this?
What is the term in the Torah?
Gever, which comes from the word gibor, right? Or Adam, which is from Adam ele Elyon, one who is similar to God. Each one of these, and another one, Ish, one who lives with that holy fire, that Ish, which, what is the attribute of fire versus all the others? Earth, fire, wind, water. What's the only one that strives upward?
Air.
Well, not air. Air sits still. Fire, Ish, Ish, Isha. Both of them are derivatives of man, or a woman is a derivative of fire that strives to climb higher. That's the spirit, the fire in our own neshama. We, as human beings, have this key aspect in which we are similar to a tree, we strive to grow. And in that, and think about it, this is that little exercise that we will do at the end of each one of these. Take the time to do this on page 13. In which ways have you grown and improved as a human being? Which ways can you use improvement? What are some ways you can implement in your life? And I will ask you, instead of, you can fill those out, and you should, because this is about practicality as well. But think about something that wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't what an animal would do if they had the option. It was hard. It probably caused a little sweat, perhaps even a little blood, but it was self-growth, and it made you happy. You can say something as easy as spending the day in the gym. You come out and you're sweating and you're hot and you're mushy and you're sore, and you're so proud of yourself, right? Or the day that you didn't eat that cookie, right? No, these are holy brownies, but
That's what I could do.
but my point is, you understand? We all know this. We all know this. This is not something, in a sense, an aspiration to strive for. What we're telling you, this is your identity as a human being. In this is happiness. This is not just a moral thing to strive for. You want to be happy, you got to be true to yourself. This is being true to yourself. Growth is being true to yourself. You're like a tree. A tree is not a tree if it's not growing. And a human is not a human if they're not growing. So that's point number one. Moving to point number two. Okay, mentions human and all this. Okay. A tree is defined not only by its growth, but it's by its productivity. A tree produces, literally, the stuff that comes off the tree is called what? Produce. Right? And in Hebrew, pri. We created the word productivity, most likely from that word pri, to say that just as the tree produces, so we should produce. Society drew that metaphor from the tree. Recognize that parallel, that mirror. A tree is productive, literally produces fruition. All this is language that we borrow from the tree and what it does. And this is a principle of Torah. Look, text 7. A tree, by definition, is meant to produce fruit. Like the verse says, a tree that produces fruit. Does anybody know that originally all trees produced fruit? It was the sin of the tree of knowledge that decimated the productivity of half the trees. Originally, all trees bore fruit. This is one of the cataclysmic results of the eating of the tree of knowledge, was that many of the trees went barren. So all trees, so when we are talking about fruit, this aspect, the trees bear fruit, understand that this is really applicable to all trees. Unfortunately, some trees had that taken away. But every tree is meant to produce. And that's why it says, right, when the Torah says the creation of trees, what does the Torah say? Trees that bear fruit. Eitz ose pri is the quote about all trees. This is their nature. This is what defines them. This is a part of their identity, that they produce. That means it grows fruit in a way where its seed is within it, meaning that each fruit contains seeds that can grow into another tree, etc. We're going to talk about that in a moment, the idea of perpetuation. This idea is underscored by the New Year for the trees on the 15th of Shvat, because think about it. How do we celebrate the New Year of the trees? Or what is the New Year of the trees observed as? Do we all go outside and hug a tree? What is the main way we celebrate? Eat fruit. The 5th and the 15th of Shvat, in legal terms, is fruit from before the 15th of Shvat, belong to the earlier year's tithe, and the fruit that come on the other end. It's all about the fruit. The new year of the trees is all about its productivity. In other words, the new year of the fruit is all. The new year of the trees is all about the fruit, i.e., the trees are all about their productivity. Okay, as Rashi explains, we do not combine fruits that ripen before Shabbat with those ripened after when we're calculating tides. In other words, a tree's true value is not measured by how tall it grows, but the quality and the presence of its fruit. What?
It could be that when the Jews were in charge of Israel, doing the fruits were huge. As soon as somebody conquered a good over, they were hanging on going. That's it.
No, it says that the land will blossom. They said that those that came to Petach Tikva and the Bedouins were saying, "What do you think you're going to do here? This land hasn't blossomed in centuries. It's a barren wasteland. You should know that that's the truth. It wasn't like when the Jews came, everybody, they're like, you want to come here and try to make something out of this? By all means. We're Bedouins. We come in, we grab a little crop, and we move on to the next place. We don't set up roots in a place that it's impossible to set up roots." To which the response of the Jews there were, these were observant Jews. Petach Tikva was founded by a whole bunch of religious Jews. You know what they said to the Bedouins? The land was just waiting for us, and it will blossom when we come back.
But even trees that don't produce.
So that's right. Correct.
And carbon monoxide.
Very good. Exactly right.
Thing is really stable. I'm sure there's this long tree, a long stick, two people on either side holding grapes.
The massive grapes.
And two people just to carry it.
Wow.
Yes, it's also the what's called the Ministry of Tourism in Israel, because that's when the Meraglim came to bring the fruit back. That's how massive they were. But
Campaign to Israel. That's what we do.
right, exactly, because the land should blossom. Because ultimately, and this is a key point. In other words, to produce. What does this mean in our lives? This is also true. You can find really a lot of joy in self-betterment. But you know what's even better than self-betterment? Productivity. Producing something. Building something. If you spent your whole life just going to the gym, and there are people that do that for a living, it's called bodybuilders. So, okay, that's one way to live, right? Where you're just constantly honing your physique. Or, you know what Judaism also frowns on? A Talmud Chacham that stays in the ivory tower. A Torah scholar that grows and grows and grows in their own Torah knowledge, and how many people benefit from them? Right? What are they producing? It says, what have you produced, right? What are you?
Smart children.
What?
Smart children.
Well, right. Maybe that. Yes.
Things that the Haredi is to spend your life simply in the shul learning Torah day and night, and your wife supports you.
So interesting for that very reason. For example, that is very much antithetical to Chabad tradition. The idea that we don't sit in the kollel just learning Torah for forever, and what they would argue is kind of what Izzy says. They're perpetuating, they're producing Torah knowledge to be shared in their enclave or whatever it is. So they're not spreading it that far out. But you're right. That is this philosophical discomfort that most of us feel towards that approach. Is why they're honing themselves, bettering, etc. So what's the problem? Because it's all about self, and God didn't put you down on this world. Here's the thing: Shabbos is the day that you're going to be at your most holy, right? How many days of the week are Shabbos? One transcendent day. 6 other days, God says what? 6 days a week. Now, interestingly enough, most people translate that as 6 days a week you shall work. That's not what it means.
It's how you translate it, not me.
You're right. 6 days a week you shall produce. 6 days a week you shall produce. Adam was put in the Garden of Eden. La'avda. To work the garden, to nurture it, to have it produce. The Garden of Eden wasn't just one little corner enclave of the garden. That was the whole world. It was to nurture the entire world so that the whole world could be a garden. Here it teaches something interesting.
Work it with the garden.
Okay,
Aha,
we're not going off of what's called on a tangent.
What about working? Well, it doesn't work as what?
But we're going to quote from the Pirkei Avot in a minute. But say your point. Right. It's yeah. Not only a fool, it uses the word evil. But here's something is interesting. Speaking about a tree also shows us. Here's another tendency of a tree. You know that a tree will be ashamed. The Talmud says a tree shows shame when it has to rely on somebody else for its growth, and it's not, in a sense, producing for itself, producing on its own. Here, there's a concept of arla. Tree has to reach 3 years before you're allowed to eat the fruit, right? What happens if you take a twig of a new tree and graft it onto not a different tree? You're not allowed to graft from one tree. A different species, same species, but you take a branch of a new tree and graft it onto the old tree, and in the beginning, that old tree is what's providing the nutrients to that new branch, to that young branch that you've attached to it. And now it's hard. How do you measure the time? How do you measure when it's arrived at maturity, where it's being self-sustaining, as it were? What? So here's what it says. It says something else. How can you determine whether the young tree is self-reliant? Rabbi Bibi said in the name of Rav Chanina, if the leaves of the young tree are turned inward toward itself, one may be sure that it lives from the old one. If the leaves are turned towards the old tree, then one may be sure that the young tree is self-sustaining. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chanan said, here is a sign: one who eats from their friend is ashamed to look at them. When this young tree is deriving its sustenance from the old tree, its leaves are turned inward, away from that old tree. It's embarrassed. It's shame that it has to be drawing its sustenance. When it's self-sufficient, then it can turn its leaves out towards that old tree, because I got it. I can carry my head held high. A person who is reliant on someone else, even if that person's going to cover it all for them, but if I'm not productive in my own right, I don't feel like a mensch. I don't feel like a mensch, which leads the Talmud to say this famous line, text 9, right? This is also quoted in Pirkei Avot or something similar. Adam rotze bekav delay, mitisha kav min shachaveri. A person prefers one measure of their own work versus 9 measures that were given to them by somebody else, right? Handouts, right? We know this is not a healthy thing in society today, right? Where we're trying as a society, we try as much as possible to wean people off of welfare. Even if we can, even if the society could afford to provide the welfare, it's not good for a mensch to be on welfare. Again, making the point that it's not the comfortable, easy way that brings real happiness. What brings happiness?
Working for it.
Producing, being a provider rather than a taker, right? Interestingly enough, King David said, God, which leads us to the next point. Not just to be somebody who's productive, but because productivity, the first stage in productivity is productivity for its own sake, just to be productive, to make your own thing. Every kid, here's the thing that I am struggling. Everybody knows our little Ita, right? She's incredibly frustrating right now. Do you know why? It takes us 5 times as long to get her dressed.
the door.
Because she says, self. You bring her the pants. No, you're not going to do it for her. She's going to do it herself. And she is frustratingly slow. But there's even a child has that. I'm offering to do this quicker. You'll get to where you want to get to faster with less frustration and tears. Because half the time she starts crying when she can't get the pant legs right. But self, why? Because a child knows innately as a human being, we want to be productive. We don't want to be reliant on others, even if we can be. Right? That moment where you take the car keys away from an older person, even if you promise them that you will drive them wherever they want to go, right? It's very hard. Why? What have you taken away from them? Their freedom, but they're also their ability to be self-reliant, to be productive. You've taken something away from that. This is one of the reasons why many people come out of retirement, not out of necessity, because they need to feel productive. Again, it comes with sweat, it comes with toil, and it makes you happier. Which leads to the third and the natural understanding, the best form of productivity. So notice what we are doing here. Growth, but the best form of growth is productivity. The best form of productivity, what is a fruit? It's not just what the tree produces, it's what the tree shares. A fruit is what the tree shares with everybody else. The best form of productivity is giving. To be productive in a way that benefits others. Helping others, right? Oh, stop it. Run with the metaphor. Don't get all what's it called. Yeah. You're saying it's ultimately for its own the perpetuation, and people take the fruit, go over somewhere else, take the seed drops, the seed is the one part that's not edible, so you throw it away, so eventually grows. But God,
Then you don't eat that many seeds.
right. But there's other animals that perpetuate its seed in sometimes very aggressive ways, right? There's bees that land wasps. That the way you know how they perpetuate their seed, they will land on a different animal, lay an egg in it, and the larva, the angel ends up actually turning that animal into a zombie that serves the larva, etc. They eat it from the inside until eventually it comes out. It's a tree does it in a very sweet and beneficial way. Here, enjoy, and then drop the seed off. Whatever, give. Right? Elon bame avarechecha, the famous thing. Right? It's a beautiful, they have a tune for this. Elon bame avarechecha. Tree, what should I bless you with? Should I bless you that your branches should be many? Your branches are many. Should I bless you that your fruits should be numerous? Your fruits are numerous. So what can I bless you with? The profundity of the Talmud, it's remarkable. May all the things that grow, I give you a blessing that all offspring that grow from you should be just like you. No, he was not. But ultimately, bringing benefit to others, spreading your goodness. Think about how much this is true. I will tell you again, go to the high school students. We do team programming. Give them a lot of fun activities. You know the things they like the most? The things that they remember the most? The social services things we do with them. We can take them to a sports game. We can do axe throwing. You can take them paintball shooting. They'll love all that. Great. The things that they remember is when we take them to be part of helping people, like part of the friendship circle or whatever it is, where they're working with children with disabilities, or they're spending time volunteering in a hospital, or they're packing food, packing stuff to bring to the children's inn. at the NIH. This is the stuff that spoiled American Bethesda teens love doing. Why? Because this fills another truth of humanity. We are like a tree, and the thing that brings us the most meaning is when we're helping others, and therefore happier. Text 11. By the way, I summed up text 10. That was the Elon. That's the quote. It's one of the most famous quotes, philosophical quotes of the Talmud. But you can read it. But here, essential mattering, to matter, is so important. I should matter to somebody. You tell a high school student, you matter. Somebody out there has benefited because of you. That's gold. Gold. There is a great comfort in believing that your life and actions matter in the grand scheme of things. This conviction is referred to as existential mattering, and a strong component of the experience of the meaning of life. While the concept of existential mattering often evokes images of famous or infamous people who have done extraordinary things in their lives, many people gain a sense of mattering through avenues more easily traversed. Research shows that feeling that you have made a positive influence on others is unsurprisingly almost always associated with the belief that your life is meaningful. Existential mattering then is often rooted in the sense that you matter to others. From helping strangers in need and providing social support to loved ones to simply being a reliable friend. Right? We all know the expression better to blank than to blank. Fill in those things.
Better to give than receive.
Right. Better to give than receive. You know what the Torah's version of that is? It says, Rabbi Shimon wanted to study Torah from Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva, for the sake of Rabbi Shimon's safety, ultimately Rabbi Akiva was martyred because of his Torah teaching, and he knew that if he continued to teach, he says, Rabbi Shimon says, but I want to study Torah so much, why don't you want to teach me? To which Rabbi Akiva said famously, Rabbi Akiva responded, my son, more than the calf desires to nurse, the cow wants to give the milk. I want to teach you more than you even want to learn. I'm doing this only to preserve your life, but that's the principle. More than you want to receive Torah, I want to give it to you. More, and that is a general rule in life, right? The cow wants to nurse, and I can tell you, I see this with my wife. She will sometimes wake up the baby contentedly sleeping because she wants to nurse the baby. She wants to give sustenance to the baby. The baby's sleeping. I'm like, let the baby sleep. He says, no, she wants to nurse. She's because more than, and I say this principle, there's a greater desire to give than there is even to receive. This has led to a very fascinating philosophical point. When King David prayed to God, there should be no more poor people. King David said to God, text 13, page 22, Master of the universe, establish equity in your world by making rich and poor the same, right? See, Karl Marx was not the first one, was not the first Jew who said this. But except that King David got the answer Karl Marx should have learned. God replied, if such were the case, who would preserve kindness and truth? If all were rich or all were poor, nobody would be able to do an act of kindness. You ever notice a puzzle piece? Puzzles stick together, right? The whole puzzle. You can take all these disparate pieces, and it all sticks together, right? In one big whole. Why? What is it? What is about the nature of puzzle pieces that allows them to stick together? It is simply because this is something that this side can give it, that allows them to latch together. What would happen if this was a perfect square and this was a perfect square? They wouldn't need each other. They would butt up against each other and go their separate ways. What binds them together is the fact that there's something that I can give you. And importantly, halacha says, who is responsible to give tzedakah? Rich people, right? And text 14, Everyone is obligated to give charity. Even a poor person who relies on charitable support themselves must give from what they receive, because it is a human. A human only feels like a human when they are giving. Yes.
I was very disappointed when I was in Israel and cleaning his dedication for tzedakah. And I see a neighbor on the street asking for money. And so all I had left was 1 shekel. And I gave her the shekel. And she said, 1 shekel. She threw on the ground.
And that she did a great disservice. Because let's say she can't even do something with that shekel. But does she understand, ultimately, that with that she is not allowing you to do the mitzvah of giving tzedakah? You know and that's to a certain degree her responsibility, and which is the same reason. Famous story of the Rebbe Rashab, fifth Chabad Rebbe, and there's a reason why you're disappointed. It hurt you. It hurt you to see that. It should. They say, okay, fine, and go, there you go, bend down and pick it up. And say, hey, I shaved myself a shekel, right? But why? Why? Because of this point. The Rebbe Rashab told his son, the fifth Chabad Rebbe told his son, the sixth Chabad Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, the one that eventually came to the United States, was his one son with the apple of his eye, and he taught him, he was grooming him to be a great leader in his own right, which eventually, of course, he did. At one point, the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was a young child, his father says, here's a ruble, go find a poor person, give it to them, and I want a complete report of exactly what happens. So this boy assumed that, that with divine insight, his father knew some event was going to happen. So he goes and he finds a poor person and he comes back, he's disappointed. Because it was a pure vanilla exchange. Nothing special happened. Comes back to his father and he says, his father says, did you do it? He says, I did. He says, I want the exact report, exactly what happened. He says, well, found the poor person and I gave him the tzedakah. He says, no, I want an exact report. What did you say? What did he say? And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, what do you mean? I went to a poor person. I said, can you use some tzedakah? And he said, yes. So I gave it to him. He said, thank you. I said, you're welcome. And we went our separate ways. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, you got that backwards. He says, what did I get backwards? He says, you should have said thank you. No, I'm the one who gave him the coin. He said thank you. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, no, you don't understand. His father said, do you think that you're a better person than that person in the eyes of God? Why did Hashem make him poor and you able to give him, put you in a better financial, because God likes you better than he likes him? No. The world needs those who have to ask so that those who are in the position to give can give. There needs to be that exchange. So we just finished from King David. So there has to be the givers and there has to be those that receive. What is the harder role to play? Of course, to be the one who has to ask. But if there's not the person who has to ask, then there's not the people, then the opportunity to give it doesn't either exist. You have to thank this person for taking on that burden in this exchange. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give to you. And that's what she held back from you. And that's why you felt insulted. It's what I have. This is what I can give you. So why are you holding, denying me the opportunity to give if it's not as much? Yeah, but ultimately, this is what society is built on. Importantly, and thank God that as a people, the world knows that this is the hallmark of the Jewish people. As I pointed out, go to any hospital anywhere. Go forget the hospital. Go to the London Zoo. Go to the LA Zoo. This is where I saw it, and why I keep on mentioning. Went to the LA Zoo, and they have the big granite wall with all the donors, and it reads like the Shabbos Kiddush, right? Goldstein and Himmelfarb and the this and the this and every name on there. And there's only one place in the world, I talk about this often, that you will find soldered into the bus, the bus stop shelter, a tzedakah box, a charity box? Do you think if you went to Bangkok, Thailand, you're going to see embedded into the structure of the bus stop a charity box? Do you think you went to Canada, to all these places that are considered the really nice places and very caring people? You will not see it anywhere on the planet. There's only one place where you will go and you won't even think about how unique and interesting that is. Most often, you'll just probably stick your hand in your pocket and empty your loose change into the tzedakah boxes that are embedded into nearly every bus stop in Israel. Israel, it's soldered into the bus stop because we are a people that giving is our very nature. But it turns out it's not just a Jewish thing, it's a human thing. You will be at your happiest when you're on the giving end versus the receiving end. How much would society benefit from having that awareness today? Would to just have that awareness, right? So, and now just to sum up, to come to the last thing. Here's another nature that most people don't realize. In the United States, we have the tallest trees in the world. Western United States. What am I referring to? The redwoods. Redwoods that shoot 80, 90 feet into the air. Single trees, 10 stories high. Remarkable things. You would assume, knowing how roots are, how deep those roots must go, how deep into the ground. You have to imagine that if you were probably trying to put it in a subway station under the redwood forest, you would have to dig pretty darn deep. Turns out, actually, you don't. You don't have to go deep at all. What do you mean? How does a redwood stand that tall, unshakable, without putting its roots deep? The redwoods spread their roots outward to lock with the other roots of the other redwood trees. Isn't that remarkable? It's beautiful. They go horizontal and they support each other. Isn't that amazing? The redwood trees support each other. And if it wouldn't, if these roots would be cut off from the tree next to it, the redwoods would topple. It's a pretty powerful idea. Ultimately, what is the most meaningful aspect, the most meaningful ingredient to life? The culmination of what we said of growth, productivity, sharing is relationships. Relationships. Text 15. If you ask people what their most significant source of meaning in life are, they perhaps unsurprisingly list their close relationships, right? If you'll think about this, the end of your life, you're thinking about what are the highlights of your life? Family, your kids, right? The people that you've touched in your life, right? That's because one of the pillars of a meaningful life is a sense of belonging. When people feel like they belong, according to psychologists Mark Leary and Roy Baumeister, it's because they are in relationships with others based on mutual care. Right? Most famously, we say, here's where it gets fascinating. You know this. This is a quote from the beginning. We just read this in the Torah a couple of weeks ago when we read Parashat Bereshit. Right? God formed the human from the dust of the earth, and He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and behold, the human became a living being. Right? Vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim vayihi adam lenefesh chaya. Nefesh chaya means living being, a living soul, right? Anybody have heard of Targum Onkelos? Of Onkelos' translation, the first and original translation upon which all other translations are built, because sometimes the words are difficult to translate. We don't know, is it this, if it's this context or that context, you look to Onkelos. Rashi looks to Onkelos for the translation of understanding of certain words. The fact that we have Art Scroll today, we could just look into an Art Scroll. Where did Art Scroll get it? Well, Art Scroll got it from an earlier Targum, Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. Where did Targum Onkelos is the original? Nefesh chaya means living, a living soul, right? Not how Onkelos translates it. How does he translate it? Elokim yas adam afra min ar'a v'nafach ba'apoy nishmat dechaye, and God breathed into him the breath of life. V'havas ba'adam leruach, and the person became a ruach, not chaya, which would be also the Aramaic. Ruach mimalala. Ruach mimalala. God created man dust from the earth, and he breathed into the nostrils the soul of life, and the human became a speaking spirit. What? Ruach memalala. And man became a communicator. And man became a communicator. Says Onkelos, in this, we are defining the uniqueness of a human being, in that man became one that could only survive by communicating and being engaged in with others. Kabbalah, we know that there are four elements, right, of the species, of existences: mineral, vegetable, animal, human. Right? Kabbalah gives these names. Mineral is domain, which inert. Vegetable is tzomeach, the growing creations. Tzomeach, right? Animal is called chai, the living category. And the human being, what's the human being called? Daber. The communicator, the speakers. Kabbalah says that is the most defining element of a human being. Midaber. Communicator. Because a person, what does God say? I pointed this out. This is a remarkable thing. God looked at all of his creations, every last one of them, and said, Ki tov, right? It says he created light, and Vayara came, Ki tov, and he declared, Tov, it's good, right? And then he looked at the trees and the fruits, and he said, Tov, it's good. And then each of the things, Ki tov, 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 right? The whole Genesis 1 is God creating and then saying, good. Then in Genesis 2, God looks at something and he says, Lo tov, no good. What does he say that about? He looks at the human being, the one that he said about the human being, tov ma'od, that the human being is not just good, but very good, right? But then he looked at something about the human being and he said, Lo tov. Lo tov heyot adam levado. It's not good for a person to be alone. That is essentially not good for a human being. Relationships are very good. Because a person is a medaber, a communicator. And so ultimately, what will bring you joy? Work and foster relationships. Expand your social circles, bring more people into it, deepen the relationships you have, invest in the relationships. Don't think. This is where it's very key information. Very practical information. If you think you're going to get greater fulfillment in life because you're going to spend more time at the office so you bring home more money, but at the expense of missing your child's soccer game, lo tov. If you're sitting with people, friends, family, I will tell you, I saw this. Over the course, it bothered me tremendously, and I'm just as guilty about this as everybody else. We talk about those teen groups. We brought the teens up to a Shabbaton in New York 1 year, and it was so loud. And every downtime, the teens were laughing and yelling, screaming, and engaging with each other as the teens are. It was beautiful and raucous and loud. Our group, like we in the 10 minutes of downtime that we would have, they would be laughing and screaming. There's this noise, teens like. And I was grumpy, like, guys, quiet down, 3 years later, we did it again. Except that everybody now had cell phones. And it was silent every time we stopped, because they're all just doing this, sitting right next to 5 of their friends and engaged with 0 of them, except every once in a while.
How go ahead, coach your phone.
Right.
Go ahead, coach your phone.
No, these were teens from here. The tradition, the concept of kosher phones did not permeate it. But the bottom line is, human beings are so. This is a quote from Maimonides. Human beings are social by nature, text 17, and their nature compels them to gather together with others. They are not like other living creatures with no necessity to congregate. Rather, their nature requires social gathering as absolute necessity. This is why Judaism is done in a crowd. Sure, probably you could commune with God more purely if you were sitting there doing it alone, and yet the Torah compels you to do it with a minyan. When you want to grieve, you're grieving. You want to do it. You have that innate nature to want to do it alone. And God says, convene a shiva and bring people into your house to console you. Nichum avelin. You want to celebrate a holiday? Have a full table of people. Yiddishkeit is meant to be done in a crowd because humanity is meant to be done in a crowd. Yeah. So here's the thing. I hope everybody found these 4 points that we went through here very. We don't have to watch the video. I will send it to you. Just we're out of time, because you'll say, "But wait a minute, Rabbi. You said there's going to be a twist." So far, everything said is pure vanilla, right? So far, this all sounds good. This meaning, that's what it's all about.
What's the twist?
This will come next week.
I'll give you what's it called right now. Twist is Shlomo HaMelech knew this all, experienced this all, and we're going to what's it called? Open this up, expound on this next week. Shlomo Melech says the following 2 statements after he begins with Hevel Havalim. Okay, now listen to this. The first one is going to make a lot of sense. The second one is going to throw us through a real loop over here. First quote: I amassed great wealth, I built homes, I planted vineyards. Shlomo Melech, right? He's saying, I'm uniquely able to talk on this. I've done it all. I designed gardens and orchards filled with every kind of fruit trees. I made reservoirs to water entire groves of trees. Incredible accomplishments. I acquired male and female servants and had more cattle, herds, and flock than anyone before me in Jerusalem. I piled up silver and gold and the treasures of kings and provinces. I brought in male and female singers and every luxury people could desire, chests and chests of it. I became wealthier than anyone who came before me in Jerusalem, and I still had my wisdom. I didn't hold back from anything my eyes wanted. I didn't deny myself any pleasure. I took joy in everything I achieved. I experienced, I live, there's something called a FOMO, fear of missing out, and YOLO, you only live once. Shlomo Melech says, I didn't miss out, and I packed my one life, right? I did everything that society, or whatever it is, says it's all about. But in the end, what joy was it in all that I got? Then I look back at all that I worked for, everything I had built and gained, and it was all pointless. Just chasing the wind. Nothing truly lasts under the sun. So, well, that's because it was mostly about hedonistic pursuits and amassing wealth and fortune. Clearly, what he's saying is you have to have meaning in your life. Oh, yeah? And here comes the twist. I saw that wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. A wise person sees where they are going, but a fool stumbles in the dark. But I also realized that the same fates awaits them both. So I thought, if I end up just like the fool, what's the point of being wise? And I saw that this too is meaningless. Because neither the wise nor the foolish are remembered for long. In time, both are forgotten. In the end, the wise person dies just like the fool. That made me hate life. This is Shlomo Melech writing. Everything happening under the sun seems so pointless. Just chasing the wind. So a life of meaning, says Shlomo HaMelech, is also seemingly pointless. So then what is it all about? Shlomo HaMelech just threw meaning under the bus. Stay tuned, listen to.
It's made you not be accomplished. It helps someone. It fed people. His wisdom helped people.
So what's in it for him? That's the
No, so you're right. Let's rephrase it differently. Why is Shlomo HaMelech still calling it pointless when it seems that it's so not pointless? Not in the sense that it is. We challenge not, okay, so then I guess it's all meaningless. We challenge Shlomo HaMelech, how could you call it thinking? How can you call this meaningless? How can you call it pointless? Shlomo HaMelech is going, it's not, he's not being nihilistic, he's going to introduce, he's not going to undo what he said, meaning. He's going to enhance it. The point of this course is to teach us meaning 2.0. Meaning on a level of nuance and understanding that most people never know. And it's going to, you can pursue what we just talked about in lesson 1, and you will be a happy person. But you will not be at the pinnacle of your of life, because there's a ingredient. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of meaning is also not the correct statement. Let's find out what it is next week.
You could figure.